thought-provoking. It said by the time that you are age 40, you have approximately 2.5 years left to invest your life. That's exactly right. So let me explain what that meant. In the U.S., the average lifespan right now is 79 years old. So when you reach age 40 and you figure out all the things that you need to do with your time, things that you have no choice on, eating, sleeping, driving, working, taking a shower, when you take all those hours out, what you're left with, as a matter of fact, did you know the average person spends 4 years of their life eating? 4 years. Here's what's amazing to me. The average person spends 7 years of their life in the bathroom. Grooming, showering, other essentials. So when you add all that up and you take it out, what it leaves you with is about 2.5 years, or to really slap you in the face, 912 days to invest how you want in the things that you feel are important. That's at age 40. I'm 45. I've got less. Some of you are older than me. You've got even less. Some of you are younger. Grab hold of it now and make the most of your time. Because here's what that teaches us, that you need to choose wisely how you spend your time. You need to choose wisely. Time is not like money. See, money you can save. Money, if it's stolen from you, it can be recovered. Time, once it's spent, it's gone. Once it's passed, you can't get it back. And here's the sobering thing about time. You have no guarantee for more. You have no promise that you have more time coming. The average lifespan is 79 in the U.S. There are many, many people who don't get 79 years. There are those who get more. So you have to choose wisely how you spend your time. Or as the writer of the book of Ephesians, Paul puts it, he says, be very careful then how you live. Be very careful how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, making the most of every moment that you've been given. You have to choose wisely how you spend your time. So we've been in this series called Better. How to live a better life based on God's design, based on God's Word, based on the Bible, not just pop culture, not what sounds good to us, not following the trends. What does God's Word say about us living a better life? And what we've learned throughout this series is this, that life gets better when life gets simple. Life gets better when life gets simple. And so we started out by looking at the pace of our lives, saying we live at an unsustainable pace. Faster and faster. We want to go at full throttle, nonstop, and it doesn't work. And so we learned that you need to change your pace by practicing the Sabbath. You need to learn to have a full day where you handle time different. You rest. You disconnect from the ordinary and you make it holy. Then last week we learned this, that you make the important a priority by finding balance. You make the important a priority in your life by finding balance. Great, I'm slowing down my pace, but how do I know where I need to invest my time? By making the making the priority, the important a priority by finding balance. You have to find a balance, but balance doesn't mean treating everything the same. As we talked on last week, to find balance, you have to follow the Jesus-centered pattern. A Jesus-centered pattern where Jesus is at the center and He touches every aspect of your life. And what we learned, that the Bible teaches, there are 5 main areas of your life that need to be balanced. And here they are, in case you weren't here. The personal area, family area, work area, church area, and community. Those 5 areas need to be balanced. It doesn't mean they all get the same amount of time. It means they need to be balanced. They need to be important in your life, and you need to ask yourself questions like, what have I added to these 5 that I need to remove? All right, what have I taken away that I need to add back? Or maybe what have I overemphasized? So you need to ask yourself those questions. If you've missed either of the first 2 messages, I encourage you. You can find them online on our website, hickoryridgecc.org, or our YouTube channel. because this series, it kind of builds one idea off of the other. So if you go back and listen to them, it will help you put into practice or to clarify what we're talking about here this morning. Because if making the important a priority is about finding balance, how do we know what it is how do we do that? What does that look like? Because most of us find that life is hectic. Life is full. Life is busy. There's the demands. There's the expectations. There's the responsibilities. And we feel like, I hear people say this all the time, I don't feel like I can do everything. I don't feel like I can do everything I have to do. Here's the thing. You can't. And so how do we know where to put our time? How do we choose to invest our time wisely, to spend our time wisely? Because you can't do everything. And so what I've learned is really that life is a series of choices. Life is about making choice after choice after choice. And what that means is this: your choices will determine if life gets simple. Your choices will determine if life gets simple. The counter to that is your choices will also determine if life stays or gets more complex. It's your choices. See, most of us don't want to look hard at the choices that we make. Instead, what we want to do is play the blame game. We blame everyone else for the complexity of our life. It's my kids. It's my job. It's my spouse. It's my extended family. It's the culture in which I live. Oh, if I just lived in the 1950s, it was simpler. I'm telling you, if you talk to people who lived in the 1950s, they say, oh, if I just lived in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, it was simpler. It's not about any of those things. It's about stepping back and saying, are the choices that I'm making helping to form my life in a way that it becomes more simple or more complex? The problem is we don't look at our choices. We play the blame game. And so what happens is our time is kind of just used. It's not thought about. It's not considered. So when it comes to time, you have an option. You can choose or you can decide not to choose. You can choose or you can decide not to choose. But here's what I'm telling you. If you decide not to choose, you're still choosing. You're making a choice not to choose. You can choose where your time goes, or you can decide not to choose. Gordon MacDonald, in his book, Ordering Your Private Life, calls it chosen time versus unchosen time. And he plays that out a bit in his book, and he talks about unchosen time. What happens if you decide not to choose to do anything with your time? You just let life happen to you. And he came to some observations, and he said this: unchosen time, first of all, is often squandered. It's squandered. It's lost. You don't know where it went. You kind of look back at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the year, and you go, what did I do? What did I do with this time that I was given? And you're not doing what Paul wrote to the Ephesians, making the most of every opportunity. You're not living wisely. You're just kind of letting time go by. You're not being very careful. So oftentimes, if we're not careful and we don't intentionally choose what to do with our time is squandered. The next thing is this: unchosen time is commandeered by others. Demanding people, needy people, people who need something from us, want something from us, expect something from us. And we end up living at the control of other people. So what happens is you are approached by somebody and they say, can you do X, Y, or Z? Would you like to do A, B, or C? And you say, well, not really. This is what you're thinking in your mind, not really. But I don't have anything else to do. I don't have anything on my calendar. There's no reason I should say no, so I guess I'll say yes. Because you are not choosing, you're not controlling your time. Somebody else is controlling it. Somebody else is commandeering it. Somebody else is using it. Somebody else is placing expectations on you. And you are just getting dragged along. And you go, I didn't want to do that, but that's where my time went. Here's the next thing. Unchosen time is used to gain applause. So many people live for the praise of other people. They want the attaboy. They want the pat on the back. They want the thank you. They want to be rewarded, recognized, seen in some way. We are addicted to it. And so what happens is somebody needs something. And you say, if I do it, I'll get my ego stroked. I'll feel important. I'll feel needed. I'll feel necessary. I will somehow get the applause of men. And our time goes by quickly. I know pastors that are like this. I have no problem as a pastor visiting someone. Please hear me. But they visit everyone. I mean, there's somebody in the hospital that doesn't go to their church, that lives 3 hours away, that they've only met once, and they find out that they're in the hospital, and I got to go. And off they go. While on their way to the hospital to visit this person that they only met once, they get a phone call from a funeral home back in their hometown that says, hey, this guy died. I know you don't know him, but he doesn't have a pastor. Would you do the funeral? Oh, yes, I would love to do that. Meanwhile, they don't have time to do anything, and when I talk to them, they'll be like, I am so busy. I don't know how I have time to do everything. They wear it like a badge of honor. But all they're trying to do is get the applause of people. Now, I know other pastors who don't do all those things, but they let you know how important they are by all the things that they turn down. Well, I turned down this, and I turned down that. It's equally trying to get applause. You're just doing it in a backwards way. But we live for that applause. Now, I want you to understand this. Please, it's very important. You can help someone, but you cannot help everyone. And I'm not saying that you can't help people. I'm not saying you can't sacrifice some of your time to help someone, to serve, to give. That honors God. But if you think you can help everyone, you have to be at everyone's beck and call anytime they need you. You will live your life at a frantic pace. And you'll squander your time. You'll lose your time. You'll look back and say, what happened to my time? And the last thing about unchosen time is this. It's controlled by the urgent. We talked about this last week, what Charles Hummel called the tyranny of the urgent. That the urgent things scream for our attention and they get our time. Answer the phone call, respond to the email, meet the deadline, make the airplane. We never miss the urgent, but the important gets sacrificed. Spending time with a friend. Talking with our kids, having a date night with our spouse, investing in our spiritual life through prayer and Bible study. All those things, well, that's important, but it's not urgent. I can do it tomorrow. I can do it the next day. I can do it the next day. And so the urgent takes precedent. And one thing I've learned is this. One of the things that's the biggest urgent thing that takes our time is actually this. Other people's self-inflicted emergencies. I'm not talking about, hey, my dad just died. I'm not talking about, hey, my child was just diagnosed with X, Y, and Z. Those are not self-inflicted emergencies. Those are things that happen unexpectedly and we sometimes have to pour our time into. I'm talking about the self-inflicted things that someone has done to themselves because of their choices, and they expect you then to respond immediately to their self-inflicted emergency. So Gordon MacDonald in that book, Ordering Your Private Life, he's a pastor, and he shares this story. He said, it was a Saturday afternoon, and I got a phone call, and the woman on the other end of the call was clearly upset. Oh, Pastor, I need to meet with you right away. He said, why? What's happened? She said, my husband's left me. His initial response was to drop everything and meet with her. But he stopped for a second. And he said, okay, when did he leave? She said, on Tuesday. It's Saturday. She said, oh, okay. And let me ask you another question. How long was this building towards this? Oh, she said, at least the last 5 years. He said, oh. He said, then I have one more question for you. I need to know this answer. Why do we need to meet now? And she said, because I can't go on like this and I have time this afternoon. Now, there's a lot of ways you can respond to that. But he responded in a way that I think we all need to learn. how to respond in grace, in tenderness, in compassion. Not being mean, not being harsh, not being rude, but also being firm. And here's what he said. He said, wow, I can't imagine all that you're feeling right now emotionally. And I would like to meet with you. But I need to be honest with you. I'm getting ready for tomorrow. I have to speak 3 times tomorrow morning. If I meet with you right now, I don't think I can give you my full time and attention. My mind will be preoccupied. You've known that this was building for over 5 years. And your husband's left. He left on Tuesday. You've had days to begin to process this. How about we set up a meeting for Monday when I can give you my full time and attention? And she said, oh, I think that would be great. And he said, so do I. That's how we need to learn to respond. Emergencies happen. Often people self-inflicted emergencies, but we don't have to respond immediately to their self-inflicted emergencies. I wish I had learned this earlier in my life. I wish I had learned it especially earlier in my pastoral career. I remember one time there was a situation, it was very similar as far as the timing to McDonald's story. It was a Saturday, late afternoon, early evening. Got a phone call from a couple in the church. We need to meet. We need to meet right away. And I didn't want to disappoint anybody, so I went and met. The problem is when you meet like that, oftentimes you're not at your best because your mind is preoccupied. I wasn't at my best, and I didn't respond the way, looking back, I wish I had. I said some things that were harsh, that were not tempered in grace, and it damaged some things there. It would have been better for me to say, hey, what happened? What's going on? Well, hey, listen, you made that choice. This happened 3 weeks ago. We don't need to meet today. Okay, everyone else is going to find out about it tomorrow, and you think you need to do damage control, but we don't need to meet today. Let's meet on Monday. Let's meet on Tuesday. It would have been better. I would have given better advice. I would have been in a better place. So we need to learn those things. So the reason that it's hard to do those things is because we don't choose where our time goes. So we react, we respond, we simply allow life to dictate terms of where we spend our time. But the opposite of that is chosen time, which means this: you choose where your time goes based on God's plan for your life now. Choose where your time goes based on God's plan for your life now. Now, the reason I say now is because God's plan for your life changes. I know we don't think it does, but it does. Like right now, you might be single. God's plan for your life looks one way. You get married, it looks different. You have kids, it looks different. The kids grow up and eventually move out, praise God. It looks different. You retire, it looks different. They move back in, it looks different. So your plan's constantly changing because life is constantly changing. So it's not simply about what is God's long-term overarching plan for my whole life. It's what does God want me to do now, in this season, in this moment, in this time in my life? And then base the choices of how you invest your time on God's plan for your life now, because God does have a plan for your life. Here's how Jeremiah puts it. God is speaking. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. God has plans for your life. And so what I want to do is look for a few moments at the life of Jesus, because God had a plan for Jesus. God the Father had a plan for Jesus the Son when he was here on earth, and Jesus knew exactly what God's plan for his life was. And it's surmised partly in Luke chapter 4 when Jesus says this: He, God, has sent me to proclaim freedom to the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free. Jesus knew what he was called to do. He knew his mission, he knew his purpose, he knew God's plan, and Jesus made every decision on how to invest his time based on God's plan for his life. He measured all his choices based on that. There were things he said no to, there were things he said yes to, but it was all based on that. And the people around him didn't get it. They didn't get it. He would say yes to some things, and they'd say it makes no sense. He would say no to others, and they'd be like, but this is a great opportunity. Why wouldn't you take it? You could build your brand. You could become an Instagram influencer. Jesus, why aren't you doing this? And Jesus says, I know the plan. I know why I'm here. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free. So I want to share an example of this from the life of Jesus. And it's a time in his life that was unique. Jesus' whole life was unique, but this was probably the most unique time frame in his life. It's the week leading up to his crucifixion. So it is his last week here on earth, and he knows this. He is on his way to Jerusalem for the last time. He's walking towards Jerusalem, and he knows what's going to happen. He's going to get there, and it is going to be what we call the triumphal, we call Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry, when they lay the palm branches down and say, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And during this week, he's going to share in the Passover meal with his disciples, the Last Supper. He's then going to be betrayed by Judas, denied by Peter, abandoned by his friends. He's going to face a mock trial on trumped-up charges, standing in front of the religious leaders. Then he's going to be hauled in front of the Roman governor, Pilate. He's going to be scourged, flogged, crucified, laid in a tomb, and at the end of that week, he's going to be resurrected. And his victory over death, hell, and the grave will be complete. It's kind of a big week. A big week for Jesus and a huge week in human history. And Jesus knew how it was all going to play out. And he's standing at the foot of the mountain, the hill that leads to Jerusalem. And at the foot of that hill, there's a city called Jericho. And you go through Jericho, and then you start your walk. From Jericho up to Jerusalem. It's about 15 miles, and it's a rapid increase in elevation. And so he's now approaching the city of Jericho, and this is what happens. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. They told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. So he called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. He doesn't have time for you. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped. Jesus knew all that this week was going to hold, and Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, I want to see, he replied. Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they also praised God. Jesus understood his mission. We read it in Luke 4. It said, recovery of sight to the blind. In other words, they're all upset. They are looking, going, we're getting to Jericho. Let's get into the city. Let's rest for the night. And then let's get up early tomorrow and get to Jerusalem, so that we can get settled in. The crowds are all coming. Passover's coming. Let's get settled in and let's get prepared to celebrate Passover together. We don't have time for this. And Jesus says, I know what my purpose is. I know what my plan is. This is what I will make time for. And then to almost drive it home, so he deals with this blind man and he heals him. Then he goes on and they get into Jericho, and this is what happens. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. So he was going to get there, he was going to spend the night, and then pass through and leave the next morning. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. I'm going to stop what I do, and we're going to have a party. I know what's going to come in Jerusalem. I know what I have to be about. I know what this week holds, but I need to invest time in you. I have to stay at your house today. So he came down and at once welcomed him gladly. So what we often think is the next part of this story happens there by the side of the road in the sycamore tree. It doesn't. The next part of the story happens at Zacchaeus' house, because it says he came down and at once welcomed him gladly. She said, let's go. So now they're at Zacchaeus' house. Now the party's going on. Zacchaeus invites all his friends. He's a tax collector. Tax collectors were notorious for accepting bribes, for lying, for cheating, for extorting. They got wealthy because they were criminals. And so he wasn't friends with honest people. He was friends with the cartel. He was friends with the mob. And so he invites all his mob friends, and they're hanging out. And this is what they say. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. Jesus does it again. He frustrates people. They're convinced he's misusing his time. Jesus, we don't have time for this. We got to get going. We have a schedule to keep. We have people to meet, places to go. We've got to get there. And the GPS says it's going to take this long. We're going to blow the whole schedule. And Jesus says, you don't understand anything. The schedule doesn't matter. You see, you can live your life based on a schedule, or you can live your life based on what God has called you to do. So I see this all happening, and I imagine they're frustrated and they're aggravated, and they don't understand why Jesus is using his time this way. And so at the end of this, Jesus pulls him aside, and he explains once again his purpose. And this is what he says in the very next verse. For the Son of Man came to seek and save what was lost. I know my plan, I know my purpose, and I will invest my plan and my purpose. I will invest my time to accomplish God's plan and purpose for my life. That is how you make the most of your time. When you make choices based on God's plan, life gets better. Life gets better. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, listen, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. When you make choices based on God's plan, life gets better. Your life gets better, and the lives of those you touch gets better. You know, the blind man's life was a lot better when he could see. Zacchaeus' life was better when he was saved. Salvation has come to this house. Not only does your life get better, but the lives of those you touch get better when you invest your time in God's plan for your life now. It gets better. So here's the question. What is God's plan for your life right now? What's God's plan for your life right now? I don't have the answer for that for you. You have to exercise your heart. You have to pray to God. You have to say, God, show it to me. Reveal it to me. Maybe you know what it is. There are a lot of things it could be. What is God's plan for your life now? So, it could be a lot of things. Right now, you might say, God's plan for my life is to homeschool my kids. God's plan is for me to invest in my career. It's to start a business. It's to pour into my children. It's to grow closer to God. It's to build my marriage stronger. Listen, I understand these aren't either-or things. But what has God called you to primarily in this time, in this season, in this moment? What is it? What does it look like? How does it live itself out? So you say, God's called me this time, in this season, to grow closer to Him. Okay. Then I should be able to look at your calendar, and you should be able to show me where you do it. Where is it marked off? Where have you taken control? Where have you chosen to invest that time? Every morning, I do this. Every evening, I do this. Every day at lunch, I do this. And it's X'd off. So when someone says, do you want to? Do you have time? Would you like to meet? Not for lunch. I've got a lunch date. It's with Jesus. I can do another time. Mark it off. I need to build my marriage. My marriage has been struggling. Right now, God's calling me to invest in my marriage. Invest in my kids. You should be able to do the same thing. Where is that time sacrosanct? Where have you marked it off? Where have you said, I am blocking this out for this person, for this thing, because it's what I'm called to do? What's God's plan for your life right now? So let's say God's calling you to homeschool. We have a lot of homeschool moms Maybe some homeschool dads. We have a lot of homeschool moms here. God's called me to homeschool. Wonderful. I have no problem with homeschooling. My wife has homeschooled our kids, and I'm thankful for that. It's not a put down on homeschooling. The flip side is, please hear me, not everyone's called to homeschool. So don't feel like I should homeschool. Using it as an example. You called to homeschool. Show me where that time is blocked off. Show me where you say, okay, this is where I invest in the education of my kids from this time to this time. And that time is sacrosanct. That time is holy. That time is not going to be influenced and invaded by other things. It's not going to be squandered. Demanding people aren't going to commandeer it. I'm not going to give in to the urgent. I'm not going to do things to please people. This time is about this. You say, but I like the flexibility. I mean, my girlfriends want to go get coffee. So-and-so wants to have lunch. Listen, if you want that flexibility, wonderful. Make different choices. Choose not to homeschool. This is not legalistic. Please hear me. This is about saying if you won't invest your time in what you say is what God's plan for you at this season, in this moment is, then you will end up doing things that don't matter. And what matters most is accomplishing what God has planned for your life. That's what matters most. And so if God has that call on your life, then invest in that. I just want to say a word to all the men here, especially if you've got kids at home. If you're married, if you're not spending the time that you'd like to with your wife and your kids, and you look at the end of the week and say, I just don't have the time to spend, work takes me away, business takes me away, demands take me away, I just wanted to tell you straight out, nothing is taking you away from them. You are choosing to be away from them. It's your choice. You say, you don't know my boss. I know that there are other bosses out there. You don't know my work environment. I know there's other jobs out there. But you don't know my expenses. I've got a big house. You chose a big house. We're going to talk about finances in a couple weeks. See, we make choices that then determine where our time goes. So you've made that choice. You've made those decisions. You may need to make different choices and different decisions. Because what matters most is accomplishing what God has planned for your life. We need to choose wisely. But it's hard. It's hard to do that because we lack wisdom. So I want to share a prayer, part of a prayer that Moses prayed and is recorded for us in the book of Psalms. It says, the years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength, 80. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. The reason it's so hard for us to spend our time on what God has planned for our life now is we lack wisdom. We haven't numbered our days. We haven't counted our time and said, it's limited. I want to use it wisely. I want to use it wisely, and I need to have wisdom. I need to have discernment on how to do that. So, life is better when you invest your time in what God has called you to, but it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make it simple. Because in order to say yes to what God has called you to, you're going to have to say no to a lot of things. See, you cannot live a better life without saying no to good things. And that's where it gets hard. That's where we need a heart of wisdom. For some of us, saying no to bad things is hard. Most of us can say no to bad things, but some of us even not. I can't say no to anything. But, okay, saying no to bad things, most of us can do that. Saying no to good things is really, really hard because it's good. There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing negative about it. There's no reason I shouldn't do this. And so we do it. And our time is gone. It's squandered. It's wasted. So, we need to learn, how do we say no to good things? How do we say no to good things? The reason it's hard for us are two reasons. First is guilt. Guilt. We feel guilty about saying no. We feel guilty because, well, I know what I have to do, but I could do that. I could change my schedule around. I could accommodate that person. We feel guilty. We feel guilty about saying no. We feel guilty because we know the need that that person has. We feel guilty because we know the situation they're in. We feel guilty, and so we say yes. But I just want you to know, do not be pressured by guilt about saying no in order to say yes to God's plan for your life. Don't be pressured by guilt. So here's Jesus. Jesus is preaching, and there is a huge crowd. Huge, and it's growing. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and throughout the day, it's just swelling. And now the evening comes. No electricity, that you can't do anything at night, so everybody goes. They don't go far because it's hard to travel, so they just kind of are camping there on the hillside. Early in the morning, Jesus gets up before the crowd gathers again, and he goes off to pray, spend time with the Lord. Nobody knows where he went. They're all looking for him. Where's Jesus? He's gone. Did he disappear? Where is he? So Simon Peter and the rest of the disciples are looking for him. They're trying to find him, and then they find Jesus. They find him, and they say, this is what you need to do. This is what happens. When they found him, they said, everyone is looking for you. You need to come and be with them. Jesus, don't you feel bad? Don't you feel guilty? All these people have come for you. They're all here for you. They're all here to receive a miracle, a word, a touch. Jesus, they're all here. But Jesus wasn't motivated by guilt. Everyone's looking for you, but Jesus replied, we must go to another town, and I will preach to them. That is why I came. Jesus knew what his plan was. Jesus knew what his purpose was, and he said, I will not be swayed. I will not be pressured. I will not be influenced by guilt. But we so often are. Don't feel guilty about saying no so you can say yes to God's plan for your life. Jesus did it. The second reason that we often don't say no is insecurity. Insecurity. What happens is we start making choices that don't look like everyone else's. We make choices based on God's plan for our life, and it goes against the flow. It rubs against the grain. And we start to feel uncomfortable because people around us are uncomfortable. We feel insecure because people around us are insecure. See, people will make you feel insecure because they are insecure. You did not make the choice they made. Okay, let's take it out of big stuff. Have you ever gone out to dinner with someone and you order? You order what it is that you want. And then they order. They order something different. And you think, maybe I should have ordered that. Maybe I should have ordered that. Or you're out with someone and it's the other way. They order first, and they order what they want, then you order, and they say, I want to change my order. It's because they're insecure. You made a choice they didn't make. They made a choice you didn't make. Now, when it comes to food, I just say, let's order two things, and I'll eat the one that's better. But when it comes to life choices, that's what happens. We make choices, it's different than everyone else, and we start to get uncomfortable. We start to get insecure. And we're influenced and we're swayed by it. I remember for Jamie and I, when this kind of came clear, so this was years ago. Our oldest daughter was finishing the third grade, and my wife was homeschooling, and it was great. But where we lived, where we were a part of, where we were connected, there was a lot of pressure to be a certain way. Don't you want what's best for your kids? Don't you want them to be well-rounded? If you do, be like us, send them to this private Christian school. We wanted to do what was best for our daughter. We wanted her to be well-rounded, and so going into fourth grade, we enrolled her in that local Christian school. And God works all things together. We learned things. Our daughter learned things. It wasn't a train wreck. But at the end of the year, we realized we didn't do this because it was God's plan for our life now. We did it because it was motivated out of guilt, insecurity. And so at the end of the fourth grade, we started homeschooling her again. We homeschooled her all the way through. Thank God we did. It was the best thing for us. It was God's plan for our life then. I wouldn't change it for anything. But that's what happens when you give in to guilt and insecurity. You end up making choices based on what other people think you should do. So, what does that look like? So let's say, for example, you choose. You're going to not sign your kid up for an event, whatever event it is, soccer. You're not going to sign your kid up for soccer. this year. You make that choice. Soccer interferes with youth ministry, and we want our children there, so they're not going to do soccer. What's going to happen is you're going to drive by the soccer field one day. All the soccer moms and all the soccer kids, and you're going to see all those soccer moms sitting around with their Starbucks, chatting, having conversations, and you're going to say, I want to be a part of that. I feel guilty I'm not there. I feel insecure. They're probably really encouraging each other and building each other up. And all we did yesterday during practice was we were just at home and just had some conversations. I'm telling you, some of those conversations will be the things that your kids look back on and say, that was so helpful to me. So if that's what God's called you to, don't be swayed and pressured by guilt and insecurity. The flip side is this, please hear me. If God has called you to soccer at this time, in this season in your life, then do soccer. Wonderful. Don't be swayed by guilt and insecurity. You need to know what God's called you to. You need to know that for yourself. If you're married, you and your husband, you and your wife need to pray about that. Come to an agreement on that. But it's going to look different for everybody. Don't be swayed by guilt and insecurity. You have to know what God's plan for your life is now. So this is what it means. We've said this before. Choose where your time goes based on God's plan for your life now. Not anybody else's plan. God's plan for your life. Not your plan. God's plan. Not your brother-in-law's plan. God's plan. Not the pastor's plan. God's plan. What's God's plan for your life now? And then invest your time accordingly. But what matters most is accomplishing what God has called you to. That's what matters most. I'm going to ask if you'd stand with me.